Good morning. My name is Nicole Rothschild, and I'm the CEO of Petra Partners, an asset manager based here in New York, just a few blocks from here, in fact. We launched Petra Credit Fund 1 in November of last year. It focuses exclusively on purchasing loans originated by marketplace lending platforms, formerly known as peer-to-peer lending platforms. Right now, our fund purchases loans originated by Lending Club and Prosper, the two largest players in the space, as you probably know. But we are actively vetting other platforms that operate in small business and real estate loans, and we will soon deploy fund capital to those areas as well. With that said, I want to tell you a little bit more about me and my organization and how we became more aware of the space and why we were attracted to it. Then I will tell you how we made it into a business for ourselves. I also want to talk about the evolution that brought institutions such as ours into the space, but without, in my opinion, changing what is still a peer-to-peer industry at heart, despite what some observers believe. Let's go back. I graduated from NYU with degrees in accounting and economics. I started my career in an accounting firm in their real estate department. I worked on a couple of audits focusing on hedge funds that blew up during the first mortgage-backed security crisis of the mid-1990s. It fascinated me, and I thought that I would move on from there to the world of real estate finance. Instead, my father became ill, and I went to work with my brother in my parents' real estate business, which focused on owning and operating multifamily and commercial properties here in New York City. During the time that I worked hands-on in the real estate business, I got my first taste of both extending credit and being in the pay-me business. And I love those aspects of the business. Working with my brother, not so much. I had to look over a person's application and figure out what the important data points were that could help me make a decision about whether I wanted to rent an apartment to someone. Along the way, I married my college sweetheart, who at the time was a high-speed equity trader. In 1999, we formed Petra Partners as an investment vehicle for ourselves. Today, Lenny is the portfolio manager of our company. By the mid-2000s, Lenny was trading global macro instruments, not just equities, but currencies, commodities, futures, and fixed income as well. My family put some money into our small fund, and we needed to find growth plays and income-yielding instruments as well. Working for my family, I was always looking for ways to produce returns, whether it was purchasing properties and selling them, renting apartments and stores, or moving into new areas in the 2000s, such as lending money to people for their businesses or real estate purchases, or even personal purchases. I was always, as someone recently put it, a yield junkie. Over the past several years, as interest rates have hovered around zero, finding yield has been difficult. A few years ago, another member of the Petra team told us about his personal account at Prosper. Josh told us that he was getting double-digit returns in his account. The issue to us was that the loans were unsecured consumer credit, not something that we generally like to invest in. Normally, we would purchase loans or make loans on which we either had collateral or we knew the person well if it was unsecured. Plus, we either got to pick the loans that we wanted or value the loans that we didn't want at zero in the purchase of an entire pool. We learned that with loans on P2P platforms, we could still pick the loans that we wanted, but we still had to figure out which people we wanted to extend credit to and who we didn't. The returns on these P2P platforms, Lending Club and Prosper, did look compelling, and we decided to give it a shot in our personal accounts. Once the principal and interest started getting paid back to us, we tinkered with the filters that the platforms provide. That helped us do even better. Then, with Josh's technology background and Lenny's trading skills, we decided that the data that the platforms provided could be harnessed into something even bigger. We brought on a coder to write an algorithmically based program to pick the loans that fit the criteria that we had established. Put another way, based on our deep credit experience, we felt comfortable that we could identify and invest in only those loans that were most likely to perform. It was similar to how we determined who we wanted to lend money to, but now it was fully automated. No longer would we have to physically open a credit file, pick through the documents to find the relevant information. Now it was all done in an instant. We ran the algo on our own accounts for a few months, and then we realized that we could take our skills and software out and offer our expertise to others in the form of a hedge fund. The availability of the data made all of this possible. This is what I love to do. Look for yield, collect money, and run a business. Purchasing loans through our automated algo-based software is repeatable and scalable, but lending hasn't historically been this efficient. In the past, Traditional peer-to-peer loans went something like this. Your cousin Joe, or in my case Zevi, true story, wanted to pay for his daughter's wedding but was $10,000 short. You, all right, really was my mom, being the nice cousin that she was, agreed to lend the cousin $10,000 for 1 year. He insisted on paying 10% interest. Does the cousin pay it back? In this case, yes. But in some situations, when you're stuck in that situation, who knows? There had to be a better way for the cousin to get his money and to avoid the awkwardness of the situation at the wedding or the next family gathering, especially if he didn't pay it back. Enter the crowdfunding model. The platform gets the cousin's financial information and the loan gets sliced and diced into hundreds of pieces potentially. Investors decide anonymously whether they think that the cousin has good financials to get the loan. There's a real need for these loans, the potential for millions of these loans to get funded, and small investors making the interest on these loans instead of the banks. It was great. That's what we found so compelling about the industry. We can take our skills of originating, underwriting, and servicing of loans and pick only those loans that had the lowest chance of default. We get paid to take on the risk and manage an active portfolio. No more cracking open a credit file and doing the due diligence by hand. It can all be done instantaneously with the data provided by the platforms, and it can be done over thousands of loans. So if we found this area of consumer loans originate over these electronic platforms an attractive way to invest our money and the money of our limited partners in our fund, so did other retail investors and institutional investors. Not only could this kind of lending happen for a consumer borrower, it can happen for a small business owner or someone looking to purchase a piece of real estate. Again, the melding of technology and finance, fintech as people like to call it, just makes it easier to evaluate and invest in any loans. Now back to my family. That's not really my family. As I told you earlier, I worked in my family's real estate business. What I didn't tell you was that it was a business started by my grandfather in the 1950s. My grandfather came to the United States in the early 1920s. He moved from a small town in Poland to Detroit, where some of his family lived. He lived with his aunts and uncles and learned their business, the small grocery business. Those little corner stores were literally on every corner. And when someone wanted to open a new one and they didn't have the money, they went to family or into the association of people who were originally from the same town in Europe. Those people knew you, knew your family, knew your finances, and knew if you could and would pay back the loan for your new business. When my grandfather moved to New York, he borrowed money from this association to open his first store. He also borrowed money from them when he decided he had paid the landlord who owned his store enough money and he wanted to own the building himself. Unfortunately, as those immigrants passed away, so did their loan associations. When my father wanted to purchase a vacant office building in Houston after the oil crash in 1986, he went to the banks and other investors he knew. My father only knew banks in New York and other real estate investors in the area, but nobody wanted to get involved in something so far from home. They only wanted to get involved in properties in New York, and so that opportunity came and went. If my dad had had a way in the mid-1980s to find those people who knew the Houston area or who had access to data about the area, he could have bought the building for the $5 million asking price, cut the rates offered and rented the offices and filled up the building. The last time that office tower sold, it was for several $100 million. Today, crowdfunding would have allowed my dad to make the connections that he would have needed to purchase that building quickly. It's no great secret that demand for these types of loans has always been there, but the way in which these loans can be delivered to borrowers has changed. The demand for loans is growing, but now allow me to speak a little bit about how banks, and all this started because of the lack of supply from the banks. Simply stated, banks today don't lend money to small businesses, consumers, and real estate professionals in the way that they want. Recently, I spoke to a bank that does conduit lending. They lend money on real estate and then they package it up and securitize it to get it off their books. Those banks that do commercial mortgage-backed securities deals won't do a deal for less than $10 million. And if they want to lend money on a property that they want to keep on their books, they need a minimum of a $25 million deal or they won't make any money. It's absurd. Or, if you can find a bank to do a small deal, they'll take forever to lend. I own a small piece of real estate in upstate New York that I recently wanted to refinance to get a lower rate. It was only a several $100,000 transaction. It took the bank 4 months to close. The rate was too good for me to resist, but next time I think I should look at the crowdfunding space if I need the money quickly and I want to avoid bank loan committees taking their time to make a decision. Banks generally don't lend $20,000 to someone to consolidate their credit card debt, and they won't lend $50,000 to a small business owner who wants to borrow money for working capital either. I know this personally as well. The brother-in-law of a very good friend of mine has a successful custom furniture business in Brooklyn. He got an order to make cabinets for a swanky coffee shop. He needed $50,000 to purchase the wood and hire a couple of part-time workers to get the order finished. He knew that he was going to get paid, and his customer of long standing, it's a chain, and he knew he could repay the bank in 6 months. He went to the bank from which he borrowed the money when he opened his business several years earlier. They told him they could lend him $2 million. He didn't need $2 million. He needed $50,000. He couldn't ask family members because his brother once borrowed money from another family member and didn't repay it. He knew that we had a fund specializing in peer-to-peer loans and asked us for help. We put him in touch with one of our peer-to-peer business platforms that we know, and he got $50,000 in a week. He built the cabinets, got paid by his customer, and repaid the loan. This is why marketplace lending is growing and why it will continue to grow. It's great for borrowers, and it's great for investors. And it's going to get even better in the future as well. For now, those investors can generally only buy the loans and hold them. There have already been several successful securitizations, and this will bring more secondary market activity. A real trading market is coming in the next year or so, and there is talk about synthetics and other derivatives. That is good news for a growing financial industry, but it may also be scary to those original investors who want to keep the peer-to-peer industry strictly true to its name. The flip side to this explosive growth of the peer-to-peer space, especially over the last year, has upset those early adopters who often blog about their dissatisfaction with the direction that the industry is headed. They feel that we have moved away from peers giving their peers loans to Wall Street behemoths scooping up all the product for themselves. I understand their concerns, and as I have done throughout this presentation, I will bring it back to myself and another anecdote. I have a 12-year-old daughter. And every time I look at her, I see the little girl in her face. I think about the baby that she used to be. Sometimes I get sad thinking that she isn't little anymore, but mostly I think about the potential of who she can become, about the opportunity she has to become a wonderful adult. And like my oldest child, this industry is growing in such a way that it too can become truly impactful, even wonderful. Sure, you can't go on Prosper or Lending Club and handpick the loans that have been sitting there for hours or a day. The good ones, and each of us presumably has a different understanding of what good means, get bought quickly. But because of the institutional interest, there are more loans available on these platforms than ever before. Also, because the industry has been able to grow with the funds that the institutions provide, there are many new platforms popping up every day. Just last week, we were contacted by a platform that lends strictly on industrial real estate. Without big money, this wouldn't be possible. The other result of all this new institutional money is that capital spending on infrastructure will ultimately make for a better user interface for the retail investor. Just think about how Prosper and Lending Club's websites have improved over the last year, and it's easy to see how newer platforms with adequate capital could develop amazing portals for buying and even trading loans. We have spent the last several months in discussions with new platforms in the consumer, small business, and real estate space. We want to branch out and put money to work in these different vehicles and verticals. Some of these new platforms are not quite ready for us. They need backup servicers and remote bankruptcy vehicles to make sure that even if the platform doesn't survive, our loans will continue to perform seamlessly. A lot of the newer platforms have that, but what is most important to us is the data. We need to make sure that these platforms provide us with enough data for our models, as well as an API for us to plug into, to access that data quickly. Some of the newer platforms don't have that either. It isn't because of the way that they run their businesses or because they don't have borrower demand. It's their software. They need more capital to build better systems. Unfortunately, that money isn't going to come from hundreds of retail customers with $5,000 personal accounts. No, it's going to come from whales. One of the increasing number of consumer loan platforms just got a commitment from a large investment bank to fund $500 million of loans. $500 million to a company that hadn't even originated $5 million in loans so far. Do you know what $500 million loan commitment does to a startup? Yes, it allows the investment bank to take down a large chunk of paper, securitize it, and sell it to other investors. But what it does is give the lending platform the opportunity to build out its software and keep expanding its business. It may also enable a platform to offer fractional shares of their loans to retail investors. Think of it this way. Many of the newer, somewhat smaller platforms couldn't even have considered having a retail component to their businesses when they first started. They couldn't afford it. Now picking fractional shares by retail customers is a possibility for them, all because the institutional investor got involved. Also, ultimately, who is the end investor when Wall Street goes into a space? Retail investors. Through closed-end funds, ETFs, pensions, and IRAs. We all benefit. Without large institutional money backing up these platforms, they're doomed to fail. It costs a lot of money to run a platform profitably. Just ask Renaud Laplanche or Ron Suber. If the small platforms can't get the large capital infusions that they need to get started and keep running, none of us will get the chance to purchase even a tiny bit of a loan that has never been available through one of these online portals before. It's just an incredible thing to think about the potential of this industry, as long as we can move forward and not romanticize about the way things used to be. Last but not least, as we all know, good ideas will always thrive and bad ones will fade. Marketplace lending is one of those really, really good ideas. We can't go back to the past of personalized face-to-face, peer-to-peer lending. We need to move forward and continue to grow. We are at a very exciting time, the nexus of technology and finance, in which data can be harnessed to make investment decisions quickly. The good platforms, those with great niche ideas to fund people and businesses where banks won't go, and also are well capitalized, will expand. And the bad ones, those who don't have the capital to attract borrowers and investors, will fail. We as investors, whether retail or institutional, want to have more choices in the market. We will have that as long as there are borrowers looking for capital, and more to the point, as long as rates of return are there to make it worthwhile to keep participating. I don't imagine either scenario will disappear anytime soon, if ever. Thank you.